Alexandros Pandazis is a a campus missionary at Texas A&M University. And I'm very excited to have him on the program, actually. I think you're really going to enjoy him. I think this is going to be a great show tonight. You know, we get here together every Sunday night to meet another everyday Orthodox Christian. And I think it's really an important thing to do because we have so many different jurisdictions in North America. We're all sort of divided up, and you may not know people in other jurisdictions. And even if you do, you may not know people in other parts of the country. And it's a big country, right? This is a big place. So I think it's really important for us to develop some sort of grassroots unity. You know, we'll get to know one another here, and we'll talk about all sorts of different wonderful things and about our experience as Orthodox Christians. And that'll help us get to know one another and love each other as brothers and sisters. So that's what we're doing. It's like coffee hour. And actually, I recommend that you do this at coffee hour. Just sit down next to someone you don't know or someone you kind of think you know. But if you think about it, you're not really sure like where they grew up or what their story is. And just sit down and start asking them, because I'm telling you, Orthodox people are the most interesting people. There is so much variety in Orthodox experience. It's amazing the kinds of things. You know, I'll sit down next to someone that's like, oh, you were a CIA agent. That's amazing, right? Like, who knew? Who knew? You were a baker? When were you a baker? But anyway, so we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. We're on the Ancient Faith Radio app. We are on Facebook Live on the Ancient Faith Ministries page, and we stream live on YouTube on the Ancient Faith Ministries channel. And so the great thing about that is that it also archives. So you can see the program live, and you can watch us on YouTube. You can actually see the program, or you can hear the program live, or you can come back later and just listen to an archived version of the podcast. That way, you know, if you're going for a run or you're cleaning your house or something, we'll keep you company. So welcome to Everyday Orthodox, and welcome, Alexandros. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank God. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm really glad to have you. I'm very glad to have you. And I'm so backwards because I missed that first thing. I've gotten everything out of order, and I didn't even tell you guys who he is, right? Let me tell you, Alexandros grew up at St. George Greek Orthodox Church in Clifton, New Jersey. So he grew up in the church, and clearly, you know, his family and his community kept him close. Because as he started getting older, he was involved in all sorts of wonderful Orthodox ministries around the country. He's been involved in Crossroad, in the Neighborhood Resilience Project, in the Y2AM YouTube series, Be the Bee, if you remember that one with Steve. While he was attending St. Anselm College, he was an active participant in their OCF there. And he actually became a leader there. He went to college conference and did all the wonderful OCF things. And dream of dreams, he met his wife in OCF at college conference in 2019. So together, they're married. They have 2 children, and he just finished up at Holy Cross, not just, but, you know, last year. And he is the first ever campus missionary. And so he is at Texas A&M University. And it's a school that already had an OCF. But Alexandros being there, having someone full time, like pouring love into that community, has done wonderful things. So we're going to hear about that. But I think we're just going to start out and find out, you know, what his parents did to produce this. Because all the parents out there are like, how do I get my kid to just keep doing all these wonderful things? So without any further ado, Alexandros, welcome to the program.
Thanks. My parents, wow. What a place. It's a perfect place to start. I mean, that makes sense.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, most cultures actually, you know, that's how people introduce themselves, right? Or at least maybe older cultures, but they'll say, I'm so-and-so, son of, etc. And that's how we get in the scriptures introductions to people too. So I should have been ready for that one.
Oh, see, that's neat. That's right. Yes. So Alexandros, son of, who are you the son of, Alexandros?
Evangelos Alexandros. So my name is an inversion of my father's name. So his name is Evangelos Alexandros. My name is Alexandros Evangelos. That's kind of a Greek tradition. And then my son, who was born almost a year ago now, he is Evangelos Alexandros. So we've been able to keep it up, thank God. And my mother, Christothea, raised me in New Jersey. And I in a lot of ways, I am, I guess, kind of a stereotypical Greek-American child. My father had a diner growing up, a New Jersey diner. So I grew up in a Greek diner in New Jersey. And my mother and my yaya, her mother, who lived with us for a lot of my youth when I was very young. And then again, when I was in high school, they were very, very close to the church. And so they raised me to know in, I guess, great detail a lot of, what the life of the church is, the fasting and the feasts and the saints. And so that was a really great blessing. I think I didn't quite realize exactly what that meant until I myself was coming into adulthood, until I was in college. I kind of took it for granted. I thought it was important. I tried to live it out, but I didn't quite put the pieces together. I'm still putting the pieces together, but I didn't quite put all those pieces together. They gave me sort of the tools, and they really pushed me. They didn't give me the tools and then just kind of sit back. They really pushed me to be active in the church. And then I had to sort of make that my own when I became an adult.
And I think no matter what a good job your parents do, right, there is that point and it starts sort of maybe in high school and it goes into college and the years after. At some point, you have to really like start being there because you love it and because you want to do it and not because that's your family's identity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important beginning and it's such a good connection. But really at some point it has to just take off in you and you have to understand it. That's beautiful. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to put it too. It has to kind of take off in you because at the end of the day, it is God willing, the Holy Spirit is Christ that's working within us, not necessarily something that we're doing. So it's just providing that space. I think that's what it was for me. I grew up with the structure and the tools, but coming into adulthood, I had to learn, okay, let me make space amongst those tools. So now Christ can actually, put them to work. And that's still what I'm figuring out. I'm realizing, okay, I got to move that tool here. Okay, I got to, and then I make some big mistakes and then I really have to, switch things around. But that has been was the biggest and most comforting and most powerful aspect of growing up in the church, and then trying to remain part of the church, is realizing that it's not just about me and what I choose to do, but it is really about simply the choice of allowing God to make the choices in the midst of it all.
I love that idea that you had to make room among the tools. Do you feel like when you were young, you were kind of too focused on the tools?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was the kind of person in Goya, I was telling people they need to come to church and go to Goya, or they need to start fasting. I was trying to tell people about Great Lent and hey, you need to fast Great Lent. And there were times I would go really far. I'd get upset if we had pizza at a Goya event or on a Friday, that sort of thing. So I was very, very focused on the tools. And now I'm realizing, what the tools are for, right? They're for something else. And the beautiful thing is now, I'm realizing also that is part of what the energy of a young person is. It's a desire to do something, and we need wisdom with that energy as well. And so as I've started to receive that wisdom, I'm trying to pass it on. I'm working with young adults, with college students. That's sort of the same thing. I'm seeing myself in them, and I'm seeing that they have to learn the same lessons, and not necessarily by being told those lessons, but also by being given the space to, make the space themselves.
It's interesting because I feel like I teach high schoolers, I do a lot of youth ministry, and I do see in teens, whether they are sort of underusing or overusing the tools, it really does sort of take a certain amount of maturity maybe to come to understand that it's not even going to really be about them and their activity so much as it is about Christ's activity. And to what extent are you cooperating and to what extent are you blocking him? And it's a sort of a hard thing maybe to see when you're younger. Maybe that's just how we're built. We're not supposed to get it early on. I don't know, but that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. I like that. So did you grow up with siblings? Were you the only one?
I have a younger sister, Maria.
Did you tell her she had to fast more?
No, she and I were raised in the same way. We were raised in the church, with the same kind of intentionality. But our lives are very different. So she's had so much more to kind of, adapt around and choose to mature with. She was, I'll say this because it's funny. She was a figure skater, and now she coaches figure skating. never once got hurt from figure skating, but would get like concussions from like the most random stuff, like during a fire drill, like, ran into someone. And so that was like part of her cross, and having to, really wrestle with those difficulties in life. And so in many ways, she started to mature before me, and is, even though she's younger than me, she kind of sees the world in a fuller way, because she's had to, struggle and deal with things, already at, that was happening in high school and then through college. Yeah. So by the grace of God, it's interesting how different people can come from similar places, but then, go through very different journeys, turn out very differently, but then also have a lot still to share.
Well, and I think, as you're growing up, you think that you're so different from each other. And then you go out into the world and you realize, no, actually, we're like 99% the same. Like that 1% is different.
And you might think you're okay in that pressure cooker of your house, right? You are very, very different. But then you go out into the world where everyone is very, very different from you. And you realize, oh, okay, those differences that seemed very large in my home are actually not as large when you compare it to, all the other people and places that you can go.
The spectrum was so much smaller at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you work in your dad's diner at all?
Yeah, I don't remember what age I was when I started working. Probably because it wasn't officially working, at that point. It was just, go get this. Can you do that quickly? But yeah, from a very young age. And then even through college, I would come back home, and in summers or during breaks and things like that, work there.
So was that a hardship at all for you guys in terms of the hours with the diner? Because I know Greek families have diners all the time. A friend of mine, his family had a diner up near Toronto, and he was saying that his parents worked off shifts. So like his mom would work the morning shift, his dad would work the evening shift. Everything was fine, but his parents never saw each other. But for him and his siblings, it worked out fine. But how about for you guys? Was your mom also working there, or was it just your dad? And was he home a lot? Did he have to be at the diner all the time?
He was at the diner every day of the week and most hours of the day. My mother didn't work there. She did behind the scenes stuff. And then she worked part-time in insurance. But she, for the most part, like, her work was us as children. And she was very intentional about knowing the difficulties and the pitfalls of the diner life. And so, yeah, my father was home every day very late, and he got up every morning very, very early. So we didn't get to see him when we woke up or when he went to bed. But she took us there basically every day for dinner. So that would be where we would go for dinner. We'd get to see him. If we had like evening activities or something at the church, we would go there before, after, so that we can still, have that time as a family. And I think not every child who gets to like grow up in that kind of circumstance has that intentionality and has that focus to make sure that separation isn't created.
That's good. That's really neat. Yeah, and I guess it is always tempered by the fact that the kids usually end up working in the diner anyway, so they end up seeing everybody.
Yeah, then we ended up seeing too much of each other, and then it would be,
Once you get older, it's really not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
So your sister was figure skating. That's so cool. Well, I guess because I'm in Texas, I just never meet anyone who figure skates anymore because it's just so hot down here. But what kind of stuff were you into as a kid?
Well, I played ice hockey as well.
Oh, wow.
We did a lot of sports growing up, but by the time I was in high school, ice hockey was my main sport. And you're right, ice skating is probably not the first thing that you would think of, down in Texas, but I don't know, it's God's providence, I guess. We have 3 Orthodox students on the Texas A&M ice hockey team here in town.
No way.
So God knew. God knew.
The fact that there is a Texas A&M ice hockey team has me stunned right now. They're really.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. Do they have to travel a lot? I mean, I would just assume everyone they play is mostly not in Texas.
Well, I was kind of surprised because the University of Texas Austin has a team. There are teams in Dallas, from what I know. So there are a lot of teams. Obviously, they don't get the same attention that, say, football or baseball gets down here.
Sure.
But it sounds like there are a lot of teams. And I think if they start to do well, they have to travel pretty far. They have to go up north and play all of those teams.
That's
but
cool.
Yeah, you wouldn't
That's
expect it, and here they are.
Who knew? There you go. Well, see, then you can bond with them over that. That's kind of a
Yeah.
neat little unexpected thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, so when you were in high school, what were you thinking you were going to do with your life? Like, what was your, or I guess even before high school, but like, where did you see yourself? Were you going to be a professional hockey player? Were you going to be a priest? What were you going to do?
Well, when I was a kid, we were joking about that. My mother would, well, she likes to tell how I would, when I was a kid, I would say, "Oh, I'm going to be a hockey player and I'm going to be a dentist so I can fix all my teammates."
Very
But
practical.
yeah, that's not where I ended up. In high school, I really wanted to go into law and politics. So when I went to college, I was really focused on that, trying to get the best GPA that I could, and take my LSATs and all of those things. And I did take the LSATs actually, and then they let you send. I've learned now from the students I work with, they don't have these free applications anymore. But at my time, they let you send out 4 free applications. So I sent out my applications, but I was already starting to think of going down a different path in life. So actually, before I even heard back, I decided to go to Holy Cross and I committed there. So it was really in college that I sort of had to pivot away from, pursuing a life in the law, and then, turning towards the church and choosing to serve the church instead.
What happened? Like, what do you think was do you think, was it just you maturing, or was there like sort of a shift? Did you come to a realization at some point?
Yeah, I think it was a slow, gradual process. And the priest that wrote my, I guess, kind of recommendation, or worked with His Eminence Metropolitan Evangelos from the metropolis of New Jersey at the time where I went to Holy Cross from, he asked me the same question, and he said, when I told him, well, there wasn't like a precise moment, he said, okay, that's good. His Eminence doesn't like if you say there was like this big bang that kind of happened and then all of a sudden. So that was really encouraging. And I think even now I look back on it and I can't quite pinpoint the moment. I just know when I went to college, I started as a politics major, and then it was required for us to take a philosophy class our first year. And I realized that what I really enjoyed was kind of the more theoretical aspect of politics. And a lot of our classes in college were more theoretical, like political philosophy and those kinds of things. And so I added philosophy as another major, and I really started to explore, deeper questions of life, and what exactly makes a good society and a good person, and how to cultivate those things beyond just yourself, because that's really what my mentality was, wanting to go into law and politics. And what I ultimately started to realize was that the law is helpful and government is helpful and it's important, but at the end of the day, it can't change a person's heart. And that is what I realized I really needed myself, but also what all of us need is, that creation of a clean heart, like we say in Psalm 50. And towards the end of my college career, I started to take classes and basically study like what the church's view was on whatever that was. So I would take like a gender and politics class, and I would read what the church fathers have to say about gender. I would take an environmental history class, and I would read what the church says about creation and all of that. And then I realized, okay, really what the answer is to everything I've been trying to figure out is ultimately found in the place that I started, in the place that I was raised in, the church. And all those books that I had been given in high school. There was literally a book from St. John Chrysostom that I was given, I think like from the Oratorical Festival, on living simply. And I never opened it when it was given to me. Then years later, I did finally open it, and it was the answer to a lot of these questions. And so that kind of pushed me to say, okay, if this is really what I'm hoping to cultivate in my life and do for the world, then the church is the best place to do that through and in.
I'm glad you finally opened your oratorical prize book, because, we give those out every year, and the kids are all different things, right? But the kids all, that they just get dusty somewhere, and it's like, no, but someday. But I do think it's interesting, when you think about our faith experience, a lot of times along the way, God does actually put literally like the book that you need in your hands, like maybe through a priest or or whatever, or through oratorical. And then we just don't read it for a really long time. And when we do, I know in my own life, I've come to this at least twice where I was like, wow, I had read that when he handed it to me, I would have like advanced so much faster than this
Well,
ridiculous
that's the
path
question,
that I
though,
went
right?
through.
It's would we have advanced, in ways that we only did years later, or realize something we only did years later, or would we have been blind to it
Right?
and not been able to have
That's
the
a good.
eyes to see and the
Were you
ears to
ready
hear?
for it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Who knows?
yeah.
Who knows? Yeah. That's cool. That's very cool. So as a high school student, did you do Crossroads? Or was that
No,
later?
okay, if anyone from Crossroads listening, they're going to be upset if I don't correct you, but there's no
Well,
S at the end.
I know. I always do that. It's really Crossroad Institute, right? Or
I would have
something.
lost
Yeah.
my ability to say that I
Yeah.
did Crossroad if I didn't fix it. So
But
and
that's
we're
the
live on
thing
air.
is that in English, there are crossroads.
Mhm.
That's what we call them because it's two roads that cross. Like that's just
But
grammatically correct.
the point of the ministry, I think the reason why they chose not to name that was because they want to focus on the road of the cross and play off this idea. Okay, you may be at a crossroads in your life, but it's the road of the
Yeah.
cross that
Right.
we
What is
should
the
all follow.
path? What is the way? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
So when did you do that? Did you go in and work at Crossroad later in life
hmm
or was it that, okay.
Yeah, when I was
When did that
at
happen?
Holy Cross. Now I think they take staff members from most of the schools of theology, and even sometimes people outside of the school of theology because their program has grown so much. But when I was on staff, they were still, for the most part, only taking seminarians and graduate students from Holy Cross in Boston.
Yeah. Well, and the program used to be only in Boston, right? And now it's like Chicago and San Francisco. And,
Yeah.
for anybody listening, Crossroad is for juniors and seniors in high school. They can go and just have these beautiful experiences. Like what did they do for the summer that you were working there? What did Crossroad look like? What were the kids doing?
I think the program has actually stayed consistent through I don't know, it's been 15 or 20 years now that they've been having Crossroad. And um, it's called Crossroad Summer Institute. And it's really meant to be a sort of academic institute, an opportunity for high school juniors and seniors to be in a classroom with people who are going through a theological education on the graduate level or who are professors. Professors from Holy Cross and other universities and colleges around the country will be the ones that lead the sessions. And high school juniors and seniors get to hear from these very well educated Orthodox Christians answers to and questions about some of the deepest aspects of life, who God is, who we are, who our neighbor is, and all the things that come in between, suffering and death and the creation and what it means to have a vocation, a job, and how we view, a career in the world through the lens of the church. So it's a really high level. It's a very rigorous opportunity for juniors and seniors, but it's also a really fantastic opportunity to meet people from different jurisdictions around the country, and you get to see like cities like Boston and Chicago and go on outings. So it's really unique, but it's beautiful. I'm really grateful for the 1 year that I did, even though I didn't get to do it as a student. I got to do it as a staff member, so that was wonderful.
It's neat. Well, and it is interesting because you're right. It is unique because most of our sort of youth ministry stuff is designed to bring in all kinds of kids. And Crossroad is really for, like, I don't want to say the intellectual kid, but sort of, right? But like for the person who wants to spend 2 weeks of their summer sitting in a classroom having deep conversations about the meaning of things. And, not all kids, I have a high school senior and she was thinking about going and then she's looking at it and she's like, this is a lot of talking with professors, isn't it? And I was like, yes, it is. And she's like, I don't think that's for me. And I was like, no, it may not be this year, but someday maybe. But, that's just, but it's true. It is for kids who are like really ready to have that sort of philosophical conversation. It's beautiful.
Well, I would say, I think that because there's such variation to each day, there'll be certain parts of the day where some people are challenged and other parts that they'll just feel really comfortable in, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So even though that is like the driving factor, the academic focus is the driving factor in what makes Crossroad unique, I wouldn't say you have to be the kind of person who loves sitting at a desk all day to be there. You'll find other parts that are fun for you, and that part will still be valuable and it'll still push you a little bit.
Yeah, that's neat. That's very cool. But so then you're a seminarian at Holy Cross. No, wait, but first in college, you were in OCF. And I want to hear about how you met your wife, and I want to hear about your OCF experience. What was it like?
I, to this day, have no idea how I heard about OCF. My college, I went to St. Anselm College, which was a small 2,000 student college in New Hampshire. It was the last place I expected to be for college. And for some reason, I remember wanting to start an OCF. And so there was one other Orthodox student that I knew, and we worked to start that OCF. And it was still very, very small because it was such a small college. We didn't have a lot of Orthodox students. But through going to things like the regional retreats and connecting with students at those, and then developing other outings that weren't official OCF events, I really started to see how far the church reaches and how deep the experience of the church is. And then one of the things that I went to, of course, was College Conference, which is OCF's really big event each year. And it takes place between Christmas and New Year's. Hundreds of college students will get together and, hear from speakers, but also have, fun evening activities and opportunities to socialize and meet people from other universities and walks of life. And I went there for the first time, I believe in 2018, and my wife was there. She likes to talk about how we're actually in the background of each other's pictures, so you can see each other.
Oh, that's so cool.
In those pictures, but we never met. Oh. And we had no idea that we would meet and get married. And then the next year, I was asked to be in charge of the liturgics committee, which kind of helps put together the services in a pan-Orthodox way, and make the chanting and the reading student-led. But I had come from a very homogenous kind of Orthodox background. I basically grew up in the Greek church, and that was most of my experience until college. So I didn't really know how to bring all these different liturgical traditions together. But the person who did the position before me was someone that I knew, I was friends with. And so I asked him, well, how do you bring these things together? And he said, well, I just invite people from different jurisdictions and backgrounds to be on a committee, and we do it together. Here are some names, reach out to these people. And so I did. I sent out an email, and my wife likes to joke about how it's a very formal email. And she thought that I had a beard then. So she thought, I was like a middle-aged man that worked for OCF that was inviting her to do, some very formal thing. So she accepted. She was very formal back. It was funny. And then we started to work together for the committee, and we talked at College Conference, but very little. But then I was going to Holy Cross in Boston, and she was going to start a grad program in Massachusetts as well, in Worcester. And so we got to talking a little more, and we hit things off, and we decided to start seeing each other, and slowly over time we built that relationship, and we both ended up in Massachusetts, and then we got married, and we spent our last couple of years there as well.
That's awesome. I love the idea that you're in the background of each other's photos and didn't, right? Like what a neat idea that you look at these pictures and you didn't even know it, but that person who's out of focus in the corner, like that's the girl, and you're just not paying any attention at all. That's neat. Well, we're going to take a very short break, and then we'll be right back with more Everyday Orthodox.
During one of the darkest times in recent history, God gave us a saint. This saint had to be someone stubborn enough to outshine evil even when confronted with it face to face. But how did Saint Maria become a person whom God could inspire, help, and guide during such a dark time? How did she wrestle with her own temptations and allow Christ to grow brightly in her soul? Stubborn Love by Rita Thola is one book in 3 parts, written for young people. Her life tells the story of Mother Maria Skobtsova of Paris from birth to death. The first section of the book is accompanied by graphic novel-style illustrations to help the young reader imagine her work, family, and adventures. Her writings comes next, a smattering of some of the notes and thoughts that shaped her. Your Life is the final section, where the reader is challenged to consider his or her place in the world, using Mother Maria's life and sayings as a springboard for journal entries, and also some group study questions to answer. Pray for us, dear Mother Maria. You can find this book at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with Alexandros Pandazis, and he is a campus missionary for OCF. And I realized we started talking about OCF and we didn't say what it is. It's Orthodox Christian Fellowship, and it's, of course, our Orthodox college ministry. It's pan-Orthodox, which means all different jurisdictions come in. And for a lot of kids, it's like the first time they ever sit down with Orthodox people who aren't like Greek like them or Syrian like them, right? Like it's a lot of times kids really haven't met different kinds of Orthodox people, and they come in and all of a sudden there's like a Coptic kid and a Russian kid, and they're amazed. But your OCF was kind of small, but so maybe that was not your experience, because how many of you were there like at the height of that OCF?
I think just 6 of us.
Yeah. So were you all Greek?
For the most part, yeah. I think actually everyone was. We were in New Hampshire, New England, so there are lots of Greek Orthodox Christians there. Yeah,
it's true. Although New Jersey, it seems, has a lot of Coptic people.
Yeah, and a lot of Syrians as well. New Jersey and New York are big melting pots. There are a lot of immigrants from everywhere. So you can basically say New Jersey is.
It's true.
Name the culture, name the ethnicity.
It's true, absolutely. But okay, so during those years in college when you were doing OCF, and maybe as you were meeting your wife and all of that, what would you say exactly were the benefits of being involved, as you said, like in these larger regional activities and in the national conference, other than meeting your wife, obviously? What were the benefits of being? Because I know a lot of kids who do the local OCF, but who don't reach out and go do like the larger thing. What are the benefits to doing that?
I think they're the same benefits that come with any Orthodox Christian broadening their horizons. Even the average parishioner gets a sort of singular taste of Orthodoxy if they're only living it out in their own parish. And in all likelihood, they're experiencing that fullness of the faith, because that is the beautiful thing about the Orthodox Church is, our faith is divided, but it's not broken. Or forgive me if we're going to use the words of the liturgy, broken but not divided, right? You get the fullness of Christ everywhere you are. But at the same time, if you're only hearing the sermons from one priest every week, if you're only meeting one group of people who have very similar kind of background and coming to the faith, I think you're missing out on the different ways that the faith can be expressed. You can talk to one person, and they can teach you the same exact thing, but say it in very, very different words. And then it hits home in a way that the other words didn't, and other experiences can be something that you may feel are unique to you in the place that you are, but then you go someplace else and you realize, wow, a lot of other people have this same kind of story, or the same struggle, or this same joy. So I think, at any age you can experience that by, going to different churches, if you're traveling or just in your area, or connecting with Orthodox Christians at different parishes and locations through different ministries. But then OCF is very focused on that. And it's kind of a situation in which you have to, you might end up in another city for college, and then you have to deal with the Orthodox Christians that are there, whether they're your kind of Orthodox Christians or they're not. You might end up at a university that is different than my college was, where you're the only Greek and everyone else is a different form of Orthodoxy. And so I think that's why OCF is the place where a lot of people get that experience. But it's definitely not the only place where you can get that experience.
Well, and I think you're right. I think even as adults, that's really valuable. And, for those of us who've moved around, not just around the country, but as we do so, like accidentally kind of moving jurisdictions, right? Like I've never left a jurisdiction because I didn't like it, but I've moved to a town that like it just didn't have a Serbian church. So I went to an OCA church, and then I moved to Austin. There was no OCA church. So then I was at the Greek church, and it actually works out. Like at first it's hard because the music's a little different and the traditions are a little different, but it's actually amazing because you come to understand what is really Orthodox and then what is more like just sort of a local, beautiful tradition. And you start to realize just how rich our traditions are and how beautiful and how interesting. But I love that about Orthodoxy, but I think even for adults, if you go to Ancient Faith has retreats, right? You go to Doxicon, you go to one of these things, you get that same experience where you get to talk to Orthodox people from all over the country doing all different things. And it really is a blessing. It's really neat. But, okay. So did you, when you went to Holy Cross, like you were doing philosophy and law and you're finding that you just want to discuss these big questions. So it makes sense that you would go toward theology. Were you thinking that you wanted to be a priest?
I think as a child, that would be something I said a lot, growing up in the church. I said very explicitly as a little kid that I wanted to be a priest because I think those are the people that I looked up to, being so close to the church. But then I think when that experience happened, when I grew older and I realized what all these different parts and tools of the church really mean and are, I realized, and then also through reading, people like St. John Chrysostom, who literally ran away from trying to be made a priest, I realized, okay, the priesthood isn't something that, you aspire to in the way that you might aspire to be, a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. It's something that God calls you to through the church and through relationships with others and through the need of your community and through the formation that you are given yourself. So I mostly just focused on being able to be formed in the tradition of the church as much as possible and open myself up to whatever God had in store for me. Especially, I wasn't married, so I was also trying to be open to, possibly becoming a monastic or becoming married. So I was really trying to just take in and allow the Holy Spirit to shape me in whatever ways that they wanted to, and then be ready to take it from there.
That's lovely. I love that. Well, and I love to, it is true, right? You read like St. John Chrysostom or St. Gregory, and they're just like, it's overwhelming. They didn't want to be priests. They're trying to run away from it. And the deep respect that they have for what a priest should be, I would imagine any person who reads that would immediately be like, oh yeah, there's no way I could ever be. I mean, no one can be worthy of that, right? And yet look how many people are. But I think that that's a beautiful way to look at it, that we just have to be open to, and I think we have to just sort of cultivate what God has given us, the gifts that he's given us, and just see where he takes us and what he does. And maybe it's more fun when it's not something that was predictable. Because I would assume that you weren't thinking, well, maybe a priest, or maybe, a monastic, or maybe I'll just go work for OCF and, there'll be a whole new thing that we'll be doing, right? Because there was no such position at the time, right? There was no, this wasn't a thing before.
Yeah, OCF has, been around for decades as a sort of student-led ministry. There were always a few staff members, but locally it would always be students kind of leading the way with the support of clergy, with perhaps parishioners, professors that would be able to serve as advisors and help out. But Deacon Merrick, who became the executive director of OCF in 2019, and Christina Andreessen, who is also a Texan like us and has been working for OCF for over a decade. She's the director of ministries. They had this new vision to start to put people, full-time on college campuses, to do two things. I mean, one, to sort of minister to the students that are already Orthodox, and then two, to do outreach to the broader community and make the Orthodox Church a more visible opportunity for people, from all backgrounds to enter into and join. And for some reason, they asked me to be the first missionary. They called me while I was at Holy Cross. And Christina had gone to Texas A&M, so she was a little biased. So that's the place that they chose to make the first location of a campus missionary. And actually, my wife and I laughed a little bit when she asked if I'd be willing to do it, because Texas was the last place we thought we'd end up. I had never been to Texas in my whole life. from the East Coast. I've been to different countries and things like that, but never to the country of Texas. And
the nation of Texas, yeah, exactly. Republic
yes.
of Texas, I think we go by mostly. But well, and it's so like, I mean, Texas A&M. Like, you want to talk about Texas, like you are in Texas, you know, but like there's nothing more Texas than Texas A&M. It's just, but it's an amazing school with all of these traditions and all of this beauty and all of this, like this real love of tradition. So I would imagine that in some ways, Orthodoxy is kind of a nice fit for Texas A&M, you know, with all of the, I don't know, because for those of you who don't know, Texas A&M's sort of a very military college. It's got a huge cadet, you know, ROTC sort of, I don't know exactly what is that called? What is that?
Corps of Cadets. A lot of people that are in the Corps are in ROTC, or they do plan to do military service. But actually, a lot of students just do it because they want a sense of belonging, something that will give them discipline and intentionality in their college life.
That's interesting. You can kind of get that like military discipline experience without having enlisted. That's actually kind of neat. I can imagine a lot of people who would really benefit from that. That's cool. But yeah, so the school, because it's, you know, such a huge percentage, it's at this point, it's probably like half of the school or less, but at one point it was the whole school practically. And so it's got this sort of military tradition, which is a lot like religious tradition, you know, because a lot of America is kind of allergic to ritual, but Texas A&M is not allergic to ritual, to say the least. Like, they just have more rituals than any other place I've ever seen. But so you guys, when you first heard it, when you say you were not planning to go to Texas, was your reaction like, no, that's not for us? Or was your reaction, were you kind of intrigued but surprised?
We were intrigued by the opportunity, because one of the things that we were talking about as we were getting to the end of our grad programs was, you know, how we would serve the church. And we talked about, you know, possibly going abroad and serving as missionaries. Or at the same time, we also realized, well, there is a big need here in the United States. It could almost feel like we're forsaking something here if we just left. And so that opportunity to be a missionary in the United States at a place that was, I mean, college universities are really, you know, places that are ripe for the introduction of new ideas, for people to be transformed and to come into their own in a new place in a new way. So they really are, you know, evangelical fields. So that really piqued our interest. But Christina, who asked me about doing the position, said that she wanted us to start that fall. And I still had another semester to go at Holy Cross, and my wife still had another 2 in her program. So we just said, oh, well, it's interesting, but we can't do it in Texas. That's really far. But then she called back a couple of weeks later and she said, well, what if we do a sort of, you know, transition year where you finish up your studies at Holy Cross a little more slowly than you had planned, and you start to go down to College Station once a month for 4 or 5 days at a time, and start to establish the ministry, start to establish the community, and then move there and grow from there. So that's what we ended up doing.
And that's maybe a better way to do it anyway, you know, to sort of ease in a little bit, especially because you don't have any examples like, oh, what did the previous missionaries do, right? Like, we haven't had a campus missionary before. Although, you know, I mean, America, we have this history of things like Campus Crusade for Christ, right? Which is not Orthodox, but a whole bunch of Campus Crusade for Christ people came into the Orthodox Church. That's how my mom found Christ. Like, my mom was raised atheist, and then she was in college, and that's when, you know, she was reached by that. So it is really a ripe field. But is it more freeing to not have ever, like, to be the first one doing this, or is it more intimidating? Does it make it a little harder because there's no guidebook for this?
I think, you know, in some ways, any aspect of ministry in the church is, you know, daunting, because you realize how serious it is, and, you know, what you're working to cultivate is something for the sake of someone's salvation and even for your own salvation. So that itself was what was really difficult and remains really difficult. I think I don't know, I guess Christina was on something when she asked me to be the first, because, you know, she and I have a very strong relationship and a strong shared vision of, you know, the church and what young people need. I think I really got that understanding from my own experience in college. And so actually the part that wasn't so difficult was thinking of what the ministry would look like, because I had just had that experience, and I knew what the experience of being an Orthodox Christian and a young Orthodox Christian in the United States was like. But now, we're growing. We have other missionaries, and every place is also unique. So to a certain degree, like, missionaries in other cities and other universities can look at what we're doing at A&M and have a little bit of a head start. But then also there are things that are unique to their campus and their location that they also have to adapt to and work around and learn from.
So the first community you established there at Tech, I mean, they had an OCF, but you built it into this other thing at Texas A&M. And so you did that for the first year. And then that second year, I guess you had the transition year, then the first year.
Yeah.
Then that second year, they added other schools. Was it Pitt? What did they add? I can't remember.
This year was the first year for a missionary, Jacob, in Atlanta. And he's working with a few schools because they're smaller there. So he's able to work with a couple of campuses in that city. And then Alexandros is in Arizona at Arizona State University.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think of Arizona State as like a big, crazy party school. So I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I'm old. When I was younger, I think it was like that. So that's an interesting place. That's cool. That's really neat. So then, all right. So as you arrived at A&M, what did you think when you first got there? It's so different in Texas, right? Like, what did you guys think your first time walking on campus?
I mean, in some ways we were prepared for that difference, because a lot of the things that makes Texas different in a good way are, a good Christian spirit, a sense of hospitality and friendliness, and a culture that is rooted in Christ to a certain degree. And Texas A&M College Station is very much like that. Yeah. It's a very beautiful campus. And so coming from Holy Cross, which obviously, is like that, being an Orthodox college and grad program, it was kind of a smooth transition. And Holy Cross is a very beautiful campus. So does Texas A&M, a lot of green. So that was really what was wonderful. But I think what really struck me that I wasn't expecting was, one, going to what is now, I think, the largest campus community in the country. Arizona State is a bigger university than Texas A&M, but I think Texas A&M has maybe 77,000 college students at the campus here, which is the most in the United States. So that was just a huge shock, I guess. Just
well, especially St. Anselm, right? I mean, like, you went to a small college. Holy Cross is there's Hellenic there, but it's small. It's in the hundreds, right? It's like 100 or 200, I would imagine. And yeah, 77,000 is a few more people.
Yeah.
A&M's huge. It's ginormous.
But I mean, with great opportunity and how much people, the college students, Orthodox and not, really want to have a relationship with Christ and really know him in the fullness that he wants to be known. That is, just an amazing thing, an inspiring thing, and something that's really just allowed us to grow. I don't think that, I'm doing anything special. I think just the fact that someone is there that the Holy Spirit can work through allows people to now come into what they're searching for, and something that fulfills, those aspects of tradition and respect and everything that makes A&M the really unique place that it is. And not just for people that are in the core, because you're right, the core is a very small minority of the student population now, but everyone just has this sense of value of tradition. Every student, this sense of, holding the door open for people and being kind. It's really part of what the university's culture is. So it's easy for people to then see how the Orthodox Church is just a bigger, deeper version of that, and then to, possibly take that next step.
We had it sounds random, but we had a family wedding one time here in Texas, and a bunch of family came in from around the country. And, there's this young man got up to speak about his dad, and he's like, young Protestant Texas kid, right? He gets up and he's talking about Jesus, and he's talking about church, and he's talking about how, the Lord sent him this new stepmother, and she's so wonderful. And he's going, and our whole family was so amazed. They were like, that boy is just standing up and he's just talking about Jesus. That's the most amazing thing. And we were like, what do you mean? Like, what's amazing about that? Because it is so normal, right? And it's like Jesus is on the lips of people here. You know, you're at the grocery store and you strike up a conversation with your cashier, and she may very well tell you, you know, pray for my son. He's in the war. He's doing, you know, it is a culture, I think, that is thinking about our relationship with God, and that is working on it. And granted, you know, in ways that are sometimes really alien to the way that we Orthodox think about it, but there is that commonality and there is that beautiful basis here that I think is interesting. So you have kids in your OCF now that are not Orthodox, right? Like,
Yeah.
How does that happen? What happens? How do you bring them in? I mean, because I know you said part of your job is to like go make Orthodoxy a little more visible, right? Like, how do you do that?
I've sort of, you know, changed the language around how I talk about that too, because I think a lot of people, when they think of a missionary, and even to a certain degree, this is maybe what I thought, is that they think, okay, the missionary is the one that's like, you know, going out there and they talk to someone and then that person comes to the church, and they talk to someone and then that person comes to the church. But what's really been happening is just cultivating the community here and strengthening the faith that's in the students, the presence of the Holy Spirit in the students that are already here, so that they are more empowered and more equipped and more eager to go out into their campus community and confidently share their faith and invite people to come back. Or not even that, because actually I would say that's important and that does happen, but more importantly, and what happens just as if not more often, is just live this fuller life in Christ that then begins to show forth, and that other people realize is different, is maybe Christian like them, or is maybe religious like them, or is maybe on a campus like them, but also has an extra element that can't really be explained, that they want to explore, and then they can explore because of, you know, the fullness of community that we've been able to build here. And I think that's what ultimately leads them to Christ, who can then welcome them in and transform their hearts.
Well, and I think even like with international missionary work, you know, I've gotten the chance to interview a few people from OCMC, and I get the sense that that's a lot of what they're doing as well, right? Like in Albania and different places, you're building up a community of Christians, and then, you know, they're inviting somebody to come to church, or somebody's asking them, well, you know, why are you so calm right now? Why aren't you upset like I am, or whatever it is, you know, and it is a very natural and beautiful thing, because it's just the Holy Spirit at work. And it is certainly a lot nicer than standing on a street corner hollering at people, you know?
Yeah, people
But
ask you, okay, well, what does evangelism look like for Orthodox Christians, or why doesn't it look like that? And then some people can say, well, it seems like the Orthodox Church doesn't evangelize. Like, we just kind of sit back and wait for things to happen. And I think certainly that can happen. I think that is a temptation that we can fall into, of just doing our thing. And if someone comes and we say, okay, well, we'll deal with them if they come. But I think
we'll deal with them. That's exactly it. We're like, if they come, all right.
But if we're really, you know, if we're really trying to live the fullness of the faith, then we actually are working really hard for others, even if we're not talking to them all the time. I mean, even the Divine Liturgy is a work, right? And it is a work for the world, for the life of the world. And so everyone around us, our local communities, but our international community, all of creation, is on our minds and on our tongues every single day if we're praying fully. And if we're really noticing that, and then we're really trying to live out what the gospel is, and then really live out what we're praying to God to cultivate within us, then that is how we serve others, because then we become that light that shines on a hill that then other people want to come towards, right? That refuge in times of difficulty and sadness. And so I think that has been what these students here have become, or are at least starting to become, and then other students are seeing it. And I think now we're at the point where maybe 30% of the students that participate in OCF aren't Orthodox. There's some form of inquirer or catechumen, and I think we've had 6 students baptized as well. So we're starting to, build up and grow. Thank God.
Thank God. That's beautiful. I love that. Well, and so, one thing that you and I talked a little bit about before we started this interview today, and I want to bring up, we were talking about the fact that one of the things that, like you said, you got to know what college students need, right? And I think one of the things that they really need is community, and they need that sense of community. And sometimes, if they go to a parish and they don't find that, if they don't feel welcomed, they find community somewhere else, like, on their soccer team or in their fraternity or whatever it is. And they start being drawn over toward that because they're not feeling that same love that they felt. A lot of these kids grow up in parishes just loved by all the people there. And then they're sort of lonely at this new parish in a new place. And I think it's not just college students. I think it's everybody, but certainly college students and young adults, especially because they are not with a family and they don't have that sort of home structure, really need it. What would you say, like just average people, like let's say you're not involved with OCF, you're not doing anything direct with college students. What can people do to be a part of like this, just sort of helping young people feel supported and loved by the church?
Talking to people is a very easy thing to do. Most of us can talk to people, at our parishes and just go up to them. And it sometimes can seem intimidating, especially if someone's quiet and they don't seem like they want to be spoken to. But most people, even if they seem that way, they actually do. That's a big thing that I've learned. And the ones that don't will tell you that they don't, and then you can leave them alone. It'll be very easy. But then also, this is a really intentional part of our ministry. Like we do a lot of things. Each week we have a scripture study, a spiritual discussion. We have services every day on campus. So we're very rooted in, the life and the teachings of the church. But also we do a lot of things that are just more normal, you might say, just more, they respond more to the human experience. And some of those things are things like eating. College students, they love food. If you give them food, they will come. Yeah. But also just inviting them into our homes. I think by necessity, we've been forced to do a lot of things in our home here in College Station and in other homes. But also we've done it intentionally, of pulling students away from the bubble that can be their campus, which is very homogenous, people all the same age, and putting them in an environment where they are still getting an experience with family and with little children and sitting around a table rather than, in a cafeteria. And anyone can invite, someone into their home if they have one. But then also we do, for first-year students, we have a program called Parables, where we go through some parables that really apply to transitioning to adulthood and to college life. But then we also have a set of workshops that minister to practical needs of students and things that might be on their mind more practically. And just this Friday, we did one on healthy food habits. We have a professor at the university who's the chair of the parish council in town. He studies behavioral health science. And so
we had him on the show, actually.
Oh, did you?
Recently. Yeah, he's awesome. I love him.
Okay. He didn't tell me that he was on the show. I think he told me he met you, but he hasn't told me that he was on yet. But yeah, I mean, everyone has something that they do and that they can offer. And those things are really valuable to college students too. And that's what they need. That's what they're looking for. And it's what allows them to transform the fullness of their life into a life in Christ, not just when they go to church, not just when they read the scriptures, but when they eat and when they, deal with things like car trouble and friendships and all of that.
I love that. And I think truly, like, if you're just in your parish and there's a sort of unattached young adult kind of showing up and not knowing anyone, or a college student or a group of college students, to go up and introduce yourself and find out a little bit about them, and then watch for them next week and watch for them the next week so that they know that somebody sees them there. I think that's so important. And like you said, I love the idea of having people to dinner, just like invite, if you have an OCF in your town, if there's a campus in your town, you can always just talk to the OCF leader. You can look it up online, right? OCF.net, and find out, who's the priest who handles that, and ask him, what if I invited the kids over for dinner? How would that be? You think they would want to come? Because they do love it, right? Like to be back in a house for a minute is such a, just like, it feels so good to them when they've been in these weird institutional hard places for so long. But no, I think it's really a beautiful ministry that you have going there. And so now you're raising your two kids on campus. That's just, it's beautiful.
Well, we're off campus, thankfully, but we're really close.
True.
And
True.
that, I think that's been one of the biggest things for the college students. Rachel and I, my wife, will talk about when we first had students over at our house and how maybe unsure they were around our kids. And now they just come in, they pick them up, and they know how to take care of them. They know what to make sure they don't grab. They know.
Beautiful.
So it really does have an impact, and they maybe are just a little bit more prepared for family life, coming out of college than they may have been otherwise.
That's true. Really, seeing a young married couple with kids, it's a vision of where they're headed. It's very good. Mm-hmm. Thank God. Well, good. Well, Alexandros, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. This has been great. I love hearing about all your work. What's the website for OCF? OCF.net?
Yeah, and then you can hear about our chapter here at A&M at tamu.ocf.net.
Excellent. And if you want to give a gift to OCF, they're paying all these salaries. They would love your help. So please consider doing it. So thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for encouraging people to support us. What we do is by virtue of the prayers and the gifts of other people. So thank God. And thank you for being one of those people that prays for us and supports us.
Thank God. Thank God. And thanks to the audience. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you next Sunday night on Everyday Orthodox.